Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Sketching in My Car. This is episode 7, I believe. If not, I'll correct it in the title. So this is a series where I'm doing copies of master drawings, in this case Michelangelo. And this is part 2 of this drawing. I put them up on YouTube a little bit out of order. But just to refresh your memory, if you watched the first one, this is the master drawing that I'm working with, and this is my start on this drawing. I think I had about a half hour in, and now for this episode I'm going to tighten up my details and again get the tones right. By tones or values, I mean the dark and lights. So here we go. First thing, I want to make sure you can see what I'm referring to. Sorry about the bad camera work. I want to make sure you can see the drawing that I'm working from, because I like to point out what I'm changing and fixing compared to the original. So bear with me on that camera work, and I think we got it. So what I'm concentrating on here is just this very, very dark area, which I noticed right away. Sometimes with a fresh eye, you can see, where you really need to do some work. So I'm gonna really make this, push this a lot forward. And I'm paying very close attention to my line quality here, because I'm going to darken around it. And once I do, it'll be really hard to fix that. I've also switched over to my F pencil. I love Statlamar's Lumograph pencils. I think when you try them, you'll see that they work so much better than any other pencil, in my opinion. So I'm just darkening this up here, and that'll really push his arm forward. However, I'm not making this area solid dark. I'm putting lighter areas in it, creating that illusion that there really is a very complicated fleshy body behind there. And now I want to push this part forward too. As you see in the drawing, it's quite forward, but there's a lot of shade as it goes around. And I've talked about this a lot before, and this beginning of the turning of the body, I should come up with a word for this. It's really important to capture that before it turns, that part would be, pretty dark as well. And then I'm going to follow Michelangelo's lead on this and go very dark here. And then working up to the area in his shoulder, I want to definitely darken that. And I think when you're translating a painting to a drawing, you definitely don't have the advantage of the color to sort of make your changes between shapes more obvious. So sometimes you have to play with the values a little bit more than you normally would want to create the illusion that, for instance, something's in front of something else. I don't have the ability to use color to, say, call that out in the hair, where he's got a brown against, a flesh color or a dark flesh color. So I'm going to need to push that a little bit more than he did in the drawing. I see that there's a really dark area here. And I don't plan this out. I sort of let my hand go where I feel like it needs to go. And I jump around the drawing. I feel like my drawings are always better when I'm, not following some sort of a pattern. I just realized I started this drawing without my eraser handy, so I'm gonna reach for that. and not finding it. Oh, got it. Okay. So the reason why I'm reaching for it is I'm seeing here that this area right here is much longer than what I made it. So I'm going to just correct that. And I've said this before in previous videos. When you see a mistake, it's really important to just sort of grab it right away. You may not have that insight again, or you may become too in love with the work that you did to want to fix it. So I would just say fix that right away, and you'll be in much better shape. So I'm using a little bit of that crosshatch method to build up my darks gradually. It's a great method to use if you just launch in and you just start building your darks up too quickly. You won't have the chance to scale it back a little bit as you go along, and then you're going to be in a pattern of constantly erasing and correcting. I like to only use my eraser once in a great while. I like to really plan out, in my head at least, what I want to do with the dark colors versus the light colors. Now, because his drawing is against that beautiful blue background, or I should say his painting, again, I don't have that advantage of throwing that color in, so I'm going to throw some line work in right away here. Actually, I love doing this part. It's a little hard to talk during this part. I have to really concentrate. And what I'm looking at is where I'm starting the line so that I don't go over into his body. I'm not really paying attention to over here. It's okay if it warbles a little bit, but boy, if I, cross over the figure, that's going to be a mistake that is going to be tough to fix, or at least I would have to erase it. Not that it's that tough. So I also want to get darker here, even though I try not to pay too much attention to the edges of the drawing, because you don't want to lead someone's eye out into that area. But in this particular case, his leg is really the closest thing to the viewer, so I'll have to pull this out a little bit more than I normally would. Pull out something that's not really the main point of the drawing. And by doing that, I just want to get some of these lines in to really create, the illusion. It's all an illusion of this leg coming forward. And in order to do that, I'm throwing in some cross hatching to get some darks in there. So always pay attention to what part of the body is in front of the other. I know that seems obvious, but excuse me, when it's close, like here, it's really a little hard to tell what's in front of what. You just want to make sure you're making the right decision and that you're really pulling the right area forward. Sorry, I had to just take a second and adjust the temperature in my car. I am not a big fan of air conditioning, but I have my windows closed up for privacy here. I'm in the parking lot of the place where I work, and I want to make sure I don't draw too much attention while I'm filming. So far, based on my numbers, this is 2018, August. Not a ton of people following, but I'm keeping the faith. If you know anybody who's interested in art and, they don't need flashy camera work, but would like to learn the basics of drawing, especially figure drawing. Would appreciate if you pass on the info of my YouTube channel and also my Facebook page, Artwork by Mary, and that's M-A-R-I. Alright, enough advertising. Here we go. So I really want to pull this knee forward because this is coming right at the viewer, assuming there's a viewer. So there we go, and I feel like that's probably good. I want to catch this going in front here and really pull this forward. It's tough too when you're at the edge of the paper not to kind of grab the edge of the paper. I feel like I'm off camera a little bit. I'm going to grab the edge here. Sorry about that. I like to move the camera once I start, but I just realized that I'm kind of cut off at the bottom, and so you're not seeing where I'm making this terrible mistake on the edge of the paper. Anyway, so here we go. I want to kind of dive into this muscle because it's really a dark part of the drawing, and also it's an awesome muscle. So I'll make sure I draw some attention to it. And here too, just an amazing bulge of muscle. Michelangelo liked his dudes very muscular. Or maybe that's how people looked back then, because there wasn't a lot of TV and Facebook to keep us sitting around doing nothing. Who knows? More likely it's they just picked really cool bodies to pose for them. So this part's really coming forward, and so I'm really putting more emphasis on the line work here on the edge of the figure, because I want this to just jut forward, ahead of his abdomen, which I'm gonna throw in, kick it back, as I say, when I'm trying to push something behind something else. And this is what I'm doing here. Doing a lot of looking up at my reference material to get the values right, but I have to say that, really I do most of the looking at the original master drawing when I'm measuring. That's really the key time to get everything right, because if your proportion's wrong, it really doesn't matter how good your shading and values are if the figure's drawn with a lot of measuring mistakes. So I love how curvy his muscles are here. I want to make sure I get all of that. And I want to kick this back too, because this is all darker. See over here, this area is just all darker. There's variations in that darkness, and I definitely want to capture that, but it's also all in shade. So I want to make sure I grab that. Excuse my arm to adjust the temperature in my car again. Anytime there's an area, say an edge, especially when it's kind of disappearing out of view, like the edge of his arm, I want to make sure I put a shade right before it rolls over. It really helps to create volume. thanks to all of you who have the patience to sit with me while I'm doing this. You know, I think YouTube is such an amazing teacher, an amazing opportunity, especially for people who, you know, can't go to art school and always had a dream of learning. It's just so great how people, I always thought it was amazing how people would take the time to share what they've learned. So I thought it would be good for me to share some of the things that I've learned for people who didn't have an opportunity to go to school for art, or didn't have a mentor that could teach them. This area is quite dark right here because this muscle is big and bulging and is in front of this area here. So I'm gonna darken the whole thing, but again, I'm not gonna lose the varying tones underneath that I took the time to measure and put in. So, and then once I feel like I have those in dark enough that it'll stand up to this sweeping, kicking back of the whole area with the darkness, then I throw that in. So I wouldn't be doing this sweeping in if I didn't already have this area in here delineated, or I would lose all of that and have to put it back in again. So you don't have to do things twice if you don't have to. So again, moving around, I want to make sure I get the importance of these muscles here as they disappear behind this arm. But it is very much light on light here, so you see that's why he kind of threw that line in there to make sure you could see one area of the arm was overlapping the other. And then again, because I don't have color to help me, I'm throwing in a little more shading to make that obvious. Sorry, when I'm concentrating, it's hard to keep talking in a steady way, so I know there's a lot of pauses. Hopefully you're relaxing and maybe laying in bed watching this and just, you know, don't need a lot of action-packed footage. I'm only thinking that because I absolutely love to do that before bed. It's just learn a little something. I feel like it feeds your mind before you go to sleep and relaxes you, gives you something meditative to think about as opposed to watching the news and all the horrible stuff going on in the world. Don't get me started. The Trump era, and while some of you may be supporters, I have a lot of issues with what's going on right now. Sometimes I feel like this guy. Anyway, so I want to grab this part of his finger because I feel like this is really important to put ahead of the other finger. And I want to make sure I get this one, you know, appropriately longer. It's amazing what the human eye knows about the body, and when we draw something awkward or out of proportion, even an unskilled, someone who's not skilled in art would be able to tell that it just doesn't look right. So we do have to labor over certain areas of the drawing that would call out a proportion mistake or a perspective mistake. I always find too that when you're drawing hands, it's really good to start at the tip when you're trying to get the finger to the right proportion. Otherwise, if you start here and you start angling towards the tip, you actually might make a real issue, you know, real incorrect with judgment, and turn them into little spikes because you've run out of space. So it's just something that I find helpful. A lot of people find hands tricky, and it's just because there's just a lot of details going on. There's a great book by, the guy's last name is Bridgman. He's probably the most famous teacher of figure drawing back in the day, and his books are pretty cool. He has a certain style though, so if you really just, you want to take a look at that, it's pretty awesome, but I feel like it's very stylized, so I take from it some things, and then some things I look at it and I go, that's just his way of drawing, and sometimes I can't really pick up a lot from it when I look at it that way, because I don't want to draw like him. He's an amazing artist, but he's very, very stylized. So again, we borrow from other artists, but we don't want to copy directly people who are still living, especially, and even people who have passed. I think when we're talking about the masters, though, because as I sit here, I'm copying another artist. I'm talking about Michelangelo and Da Vinci and some of these amazing artists. I think it's a great practice to copy, because we learn from them. We stand on the shoulders of the amazing artists that came before us. So getting his hair dark, I also want to make sure I get his forehead dark here, because he is in shadow right there. I feel like this needs to come down a little bit behind his finger. So right now I'm just kind of skipping about, trying to get some of these tones correct. I like to keep these videos at about a half hour, so I want to make sure I'm not going over, but I want to, definitely get this most of the way done before I finish it up, because I don't want to put up 3 videos on one drawing. I like to keep these small. And you might wonder why I'm using such a small sketchbook too. I do this because it controls the amount of time I need to spend on a drawing, and I find that I do a lot more drawing if I can get in and out of the drawing in one sitting or 2. And it's just been great to use this tiny little sketchbook. The paper quality is not great in it, but I love the size of it. I love the feel of it. I love that it came from India on one of my travels for work. And I love that you don't have to have this huge commitment in the morning when you're drawing you can actually just sit down and do a little something, and you feel like you get pretty far, as opposed to a larger sketchbook, which is a bigger time commitment. Not that I don't love putting in time into art, but my time is limited, just like I'm sure most of you. So I would just give you that little piece of advice, draw more often and paint more often, as opposed to longer sessions, and I think you'll find that you'll improve a lot faster just having the daily or almost daily focus on it. realized he has a much more narrow face than the way I drew him, although he's got kind of an oval sort of face. I feel like he needs a little more hair over here. I feel like this is a really important part of the drawing here, so I'm gonna delineate that with a pretty heavy line, and then the shadows will kind of crawl out from under it. Thanks to everybody who's subscribed to my channel. Please do hit the little bell button after you subscribe, and that'll ensure that you don't miss a video when I post. Trying to decide whether I want to put that hand crawling over. I think I'm not. There's not a lot of area in this, the size of the sketchbook to sort of get all this stuff going around with this really cool creature kind of grabbing him. I don't really want to do that because I'm going to run out of space pretty quick. You see his face is just going to get obstructed by the, the edge of the sketchbook. So there's the downside with drawing on a small piece of paper, but it keeps my focus on the area that I think is most important. I don't think Michelangelo would mind that I've cropped him out a little bit for the purposes of my sketchbook and the length of my YouTube videos. Wow, these videos, they take so long to load when you're not on Wi-Fi. Yesterday it took 7.5 hours for my phone to actually post a video. So I may start posting them at night when I'm back home and hooked up to Wi-Fi, rather than trying to do it in the background during my work day. Just keeps your phone on and really drags your battery life down too. So anyway, the woes of filmmaking on YouTube. Stop whining now. So I'm looking here and I realize that this really is an important feature here of the drawing, and that's the way this nicely curves up and this leg goes over the top of the other leg. So I'm gonna get that in there. I'm always looking around too. When I start darkening, say this area, I'll go, okay, well now it kind of doesn't go behind here as much, so I go and I adjust the darkness there. Really important too to do that if you're going for that somewhat realistic approach. Certainly that was Michelangelo's deal. I've always loved realistic figure drawing. It was one of my favorite things to do in college. I went to Rhode Island School of Design in Providence and graduated with a BFA, Bachelor's Fine Arts in Illustration. I thought I was going to get a job out of college illustrating books. I didn't realize that there really wasn't, at the time when I graduated anyway, a full-time opportunity in, working for newspapers or magazines, drawing illustrations or doing book covers. It's really all freelanced, and it still is for the most part. So I didn't take the advice of, or I didn't have the opportunity to take the advice that I heard later when you're in college, is to really look at the want ads. If you're wanting to work full time and have the security of a job in the arts, make sure your job exists. And look at, on LinkedIn and on Indeed, some of those great search engines, to find out what kind of jobs are truly out there if you want the security of a full-time job. So once I realized that wasn't the case, I ended up taking a job in product design and product development right out of college, and that's where I've been ever since. It's good, steady work. We design the things that people, the products that people buy, a lot of giftware, a lot of home decorations. And so I fell into that. I still used my drawing skills. Still was definitely an art-based job. But I didn't exactly fall into the line of work that I thought I would when graduating college. I had no interest in trying to work freelance and being concerned where my next job was coming from. I just did not have the guts to do it, I'll be honest. I certainly did not want to struggle as a fine artist. I really admire people who go for it. But that is a tough way to earn a living. It's a lot of people just, selling your art is a tough racket, and I respect anybody who's figured out a way to do it and who has put the time in to improve their craft to really make it happen. But I wanted a steadier gig, so I don't regret my choice. And I always think, well, someday when I retire from product design, that's when I will pursue getting my work out there, possibly in galleries. Who knows? Who knows? Of course, by then, galleries might not be the way to go. So much is happening online. It's a real exciting time to be a design student and a fine artist. Spending a lot of time over here. I want to make sure I spread out the time evenly on this drawing, since we're getting close to finishing up, at least in this segment. And then I'll post the final drawing on my Artwork by Mary page so you can see how it turned out, since I probably will be adding some more work to this after the video. But right now I'm just kind of doing a sweeping look around to see where I need to darken things. Definitely this leg is quite dark in here, so I'll make sure I capture that. I love building up the shading gradually. I'm a big fan of pencil. I'm not in a charcoal stage of my artwork. I did a lot of charcoal in college, and it is pretty cool. It's great, but for this, for drawing in your car to be covered, I'm wearing white pants today, so especially I don't really want to have to deal with getting charcoal dust all over me. So some of my material choices are based on convenience at this stage of my life. Hopefully someday I will have a messy studio where I can pursue all sorts of different medium and not have to really worry about messing up my clothes before I head into work. Look forward to that day. But I make the most of this day too. Don't put off doing your art. If you're constantly thinking I'll do that later, it won't happen. You won't get yourself into the practice of working at your craft. So you gotta jam it in. You gotta jam it into your schedule. Even before you think you have the time to do it. That's what I would recommend. There, I finally think the bottom of that leg is working now. I'm just gonna sketch in lightly this, whatever the heck this thing is. Wild turkey? Vulture? Who knows? It's got a lot of cool bumps. I've said this before too, be careful repeating textures too evenly or things look funky. I think I'm almost out of time, people, so thanks again for watching. Take a look on my Artwork by Mary page where I will post this completed sketch, or as completed as I deem it to be. Look at how I'm scrambling now because I know I'm closing this video. I'm trying to get in the last few corrections. I'm constantly correcting, and I just especially want to correct everything before I sign off, but that's not going to be a possibility. But thanks everyone for listening in, and as always, I want to thank you all for tuning in and hope you tune in again for the next one. Thanks so much. Bye.